are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us today for this Safe Streets and Roads for All 2026 funding workshop for recipients of DNPAO funding. Lovely to see so many familiar faces and names. Folks are welcome to be on video or not, whatever works for you. We have this structured as a Zoom meeting intentionally. The chat is open and active. Ken McLeod from the Bike League is going to start with a presentation. He'll pass it over to me, and then we are going to just open it up for questions. As you'll hear in our presentations, there is a short window of time to apply for these funds. And we want to use today to make sure that to set you up for success, and then to have time to be able to answer questions you have, point you to resources, and really make this as fruitful for you as possible. So feel free to drop questions into the chat, but at the end, we'll just have folks come off mute and ask their questions as they go. This meeting is being recorded. If you do not consent to that, please exit. And we will send out the slides and the recording afterward. And with that, I will pass it over to my colleague, Ken McLeod at the League of American Bicyclists to get us started.
Thank you, Marisa, and great to speak with everyone today. Get the slides up. Hopefully everyone is seeing my slides now. Can I get confirmation?
I don't see them yet. Okay, now I do. Yep, there we go.
Okay, great. So yeah, I'm Ken McLeod. I'm the policy director for the League of American Bicyclists. Really excited to talk to you about Safe Streets and Roads for All grants today. One of the things that's important about the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program is it's about reducing traffic deaths and serious injuries for all road users. So since 2009, there's been a really significant increase in the number of people biking and walking who are killed on our streets in America. Luckily, perhaps thanks to this program and other programs, we have seen that decrease in the last couple of years, but we still have a very elevated level of traffic deaths in the United States, and it's still 6,000 or so people walking who are killed each year and about 1,000 bicyclists who are killed each year. So it's good to see that number coming down a little bit from record highs, but it's still way too many. And this grant program is a really good way to address those issues. And at the League of American Bicyclists, we've been working to get roads better for people biking since 1880, when the big impetus was getting roads paved. Now it's really a focus on slower, safer speeds, separated infrastructure, and having the programmatic support for people who are interested in biking so they can choose to bike and do so safely. Just at a very base level, SS4A, Safe Streets and Roads for All, is a grant program created by the 2021 Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. It was appropriated with 5 years of funding, and this is the last year under that transportation bill. The transportation bill will hopefully be reauthorized soon. It expires in the fall, and we're likely to see either a reauthorization or an extension of that hopefully includes Safe Streets and Roads for All, because it's been an extremely popular grant program. It distributes about $1 billion every year, and so far there have been over 2,300 grants awarded and almost $4 billion in federal funds awarded. And this is a short timeline for this grant cycle. If you're listening to this on today, May 6th, the applications are due May 26th at 5 p.m. Eastern time. So not a lot of time, but still plenty of time to apply. The program really is about comprehensive actions to reduce traffic deaths. So that kind of takes place in two distinct pathways within this grant program. There are planning and demonstration grants, which can include supplemental grants. If you have never, if you're in a community that has never applied for Safe Streets and Roads for All funding in the past, you are going to want to apply for a planning and demonstration grant. You're going to want to specify that you're pursuing a comprehensive safety action plan. and that's going to be the main thing in your grant for your planning and demonstration grant. It can include other types of planning. It can include demonstrations, but it's going to have to include that comprehensive safety action plan if you've never done that before. And then there's the implementation grant program. This is for communities that have that qualifying comprehensive safety action plan. It's really important to talk about how the project that you want to implement relates to that comprehensive safety action plan. And that's going to be what creates a permanent project that really improves safety in your community. It is notable that the planning and demonstration grants throughout the history of this program have been much easier to get. Those implementation grants are much more competitive for communities that applied and were not given a grant last year. The letters that they received said that 75% of implementation grants were not able to be funded, which kind of speaks to the popularity of this grant program, but also speaks to how difficult those grants can be to get. So this is just another way of saying implementation grants get more money through this program, but planning gets more grants. So if you look on the funding side, it's going to be very heavily biased towards implementation. If you look at the number of grants, it's going to be very heavily biased towards planning and demonstration. So it's just about choosing what's right for your community, where you're at. If you want to go after the implementation grant but hedge, you can include supplemental planning and demonstration activities. And you can still be funded for those planning and demonstration grant activities, even if your implementation grant is not funded. So it's really important to think about how you're going to find success and what meets the needs of your community. Just a little bit about the grant amounts to expect. Those planning and demonstration grants are much smaller. Average size is around $650,000, but they can go up to $5 million. That was a little bit lower last year under the current administration than in previous years, and that's is expected to continue this coming year. So that max of $5 million is there. Implementation grants can go up to $25 million. Again, that was down a little bit from past years, but that's the max under the Notice of Funding Opportunity this year. And that average is more around $10 million. So quite a bit more than the average planning and demonstration grant. It is notable, if you're familiar with a program like Transportation Alternatives, the average grant size under Transportation Alternatives is somewhat similar to that planning and demonstration grant size of $650,000, with the difference that is for planning and demonstration versus a permanent project. As I maybe said earlier, there is only one deadline this year. In some of the previous iterations of this grant program, there have been multiple deadlines for one grant cycle. This year, there's just the one deadline. It is May 26th at 5 p.m. Eastern. And another important thing to note is that it is one application per jurisdiction. You have to choose what you are applying for with your one application. And if you happen to be in an area where there are multiple jurisdictions that overlap, or multiple jurisdictions have plans or previous plans, there is a requirement to have coordination in those applications so that they aren't deemed duplicative, which means you would not get funded. So just you can find previous awards online, or Marisa or I would be happy to help answer if there have been previous awards in your area. And you just need to make sure that you have addressed that coordination in your application through letters of support or other evidence. So this is a little bit more about this. This is a specific example from MACOG, the Michiana Area Council of Governments in Northern Indiana. They received a Safe Streets and Roads for All planning and demonstration grant for their entire metropolitan planning organization area. But there are also at least 3 communities within their area that have received SS4A grants in South Bend, Osceola, and Warsaw. So if any of these jurisdictions wanted to apply, they would just need to demonstrate that there is coordination between them and that they aren't doing duplicative actions that might prevent them from getting funded. And the Notice of Funding Opportunity gives the examples of letter or email as ways to show that coordination. Probably a letter in support is the strongest and best way you can show that coordination and would be my recommendation. And just reiterating, it is 20 days to apply. So we are close. There's still plenty of time to apply, but there's just 20 days to apply. And a couple other things to note, hopefully not an issue for you or any of the entities you might be working with, but you do need to have a SAM ID in order to apply. That can take up to 30 days to get if you don't already have it. If you're a DMPAO grant recipient, as a grant recipient from the federal government, you should already have that number. But if you're working with another entity, maybe there's a chance they don't. It's good to double check on, but hopefully they do. And then the USDOT did have opportunities for technical questions and pre-application eligibility review, but both of those opportunities have passed. So if you have technical questions or you want review, that's a great time to use technical assistance providers like myself or Marisa, who can hopefully answer those questions for you. In the timeline, you have up to 5 years for performance. So I would recommend in your application giving yourself that entire 5 years. That'll prevent having to revisit your grant agreement with USDOT if you are not able to perform in a fewer years. That might put you completing your planning and demonstration grant or your implementation grant by almost 2032, which is when NASA says they will start a semi-permanent crew presence on the moon in some of their recent communications. It feels like a long way out, but I would recommend giving yourself that time just so you don't have to revisit that grant agreement, which can take up to a year to execute with USDOT after the awards announcement. So just something to consider. I know you probably want to implement these planning and implementation grants as soon as possible, but just give yourself that time when you're drafting your agreement, when you're drafting your application. Some notes on eligible entities. We looked at past awarded applicant types, and you can really see how strongly it is associated with city or township governments and county governments. This program is one of the few discretionary grant programs where local entities apply directly to USDOT. State DOTs are not an eligible entity in this program, but you can also see there are those metropolitan planning organizations, there are other regional organizations, there are the Indian and Native American tribal governments that are federally recognized, and those tribal governments also have some opportunity for 100% federal funding under this program, which is important to note. So there are many eligible entities. It's just important to know that it is not something geared towards states. It is for those local communities. And when you look at the past of this program, it is heavily geared towards those city, township, or county governments. Just some notes on non-eligible entities. You have your state level agencies, political subdivisions not created under the authority of state law, nonprofit organizations, unless they are created under state law, private sector entities, and anyone who is not listed as eligible is not an eligible entity. So if you're not eligible, you can still help eligible entities. You can provide them technical assistance on their grant applications. You can also participate as a contracted entity. So that could be doing road safety audits as part of a planning and demonstration grant for your city or township or county. It's just important to know there are contracting rules, and if you are helping on that application, unless USDT has authorized reimbursement for that help, you won't be reimbursed for any funds spent in preparation of that application. So some general advice when you're drafting your application. So the planning demonstration grant application, it is a 2-page narrative. It's very short, and that makes it easy to apply to. And it calls out the safety context is really what it's asking for in that 2-page narrative. It's going to want a clear scope of your action plan, clear description of the safety issues, and a clear approach to your plan development. There are national data around safety impact and underserved communities defined as areas of persistent poverty that do not need to be addressed in that narrative. So you can really focus on that safety context for your community. So they have these great rubrics, and I would really recommend taking the time to read through them. And as you're writing your two-page narrative, double checking, triple checking that you are meeting the needs of that rubric, that you are, writing to the test. Because this is a competitive grant program and they're telling you how they want you to approach it. On implementation, this is where the money is at. This is the permanent projects. This is where it is much more competitive. So you get up to 12 pages for your narrative here, but you have to address 4 merit criteria. So they have rubrics for each of those merit criteria, and those criteria are safety need, safety impact, implementation costs, engagement, and collaboration. You will also need to address project readiness, but it is not a merit criteria. It's just one of the considerations for this very competitive part of this grant program. So again, write to the test, make sure you are hitting all of the points that they say you need to hit to be highly scored according to the merit criteria. And that's really going to help you be competitive in this highly competitive grant. If your grant application kind of makes it through those initial merit considerations, it will go before a senior review team. And this notice of funding opportunity has noted that there are some things that are less favorable considerations, and those may be relevant to physical activity, biking and walking infrastructure, or other traffic safety things you want to pursue. So the 3 things that they list as less favorable considerations are infrastructure that reduces level of service, automated enforcement outside work and school zones and school buses, and new bike lanes that reduce vehicle capacity or impair vehicle movement. And I put a picture of this bike lane in my city of Roanoke, Virginia, because I think it's a good example of a new bike lane that does not reduce vehicle capacity or impair vehicle movement. It repurposed a seldom used parking lane and primarily goes alongside this railroad track. So vehicle lanes were not taken to make this bike lane. It does not impair vehicle movement because vehicles do not turn across it or are otherwise obstructed by it in any way. So this type of bike lane is the type of new bike lane that should be acceptable and not disfavored under this less favorable consideration. Those less favorable considerations are new to this notice of funding opportunity, but there also has been a greater emphasis on reviewing bicycle infrastructure specifically under this administration. But when we looked at the award descriptions from prior years and last year, we actually found that bicycle infrastructure was included in award descriptions at a slightly higher rate last year than in previous years. So I'm saying this to say that you should not feel like you can't do bicycle projects. They were awarded last year. It was also really interesting to see in this text analysis that walking and pedestrian terms came up at a higher rate as well, and that speed management, enforcing speed limits also came up at a higher rate than in previous years. And on that top line, there was a very strong emphasis on the Federal Highway Administration's proven safety countermeasures, which include a number of bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure strategies. So it's really good to review those, make reference to those. Those are data-driven, evidence-driven countermeasures that the Federal Highway Administration supports. So really strong for the applications. So I want to just dig in a little bit about how to address that less favorable consideration language. Each of those less favorable considerations has a kind of guidance around it. So you can do a thing, you just can't have that thing have this outcome. So infrastructure that reduces level of service. Level of service is this measure typically expressed on this A through F scale about the flow of traffic. So if you want to address it, which you should if you're going to do infrastructure that you are worried might cause them to see it as a less favorable consideration, you're going to want to address how that infrastructure impacts volume, capacity, or delay of motor vehicles so that you're speaking directly to those level of service concerns. So in my community, I know there was a two-way bike lane put in on what used to be a four-lane roadway. It was built in the 1990s for an estimated 20,000 vehicles per day. We're now 30 years later. It had less than 10,000 vehicles per day, so it didn't have the volume. And we did reduce capacity, but the capacity can easily handle the volume that it in fact has. The projections from the 1990s were wrong, and the actual practice showed that the volume and capacity was sufficient with fewer lanes, and there's no anticipated vehicle delay by the change that we made in that roadway. So going and speaking to those factors that might address level of service concerns is how you should address this less favorable consideration, in my opinion. Another less favorable consideration is that automated enforcement, but it's automated enforcement outside of particular places. So outside of work zones, school zones, and school buses. And this is something where states have different laws about where automated enforcement can happen. So it might not even be an issue in your state that you could do automated enforcement outside of these areas. Or you could use your state law as a reference for why you will only do it in those permissible areas. I think this is one of the maybe more easy ones of the less favorable considerations to address because there are restrictions on where automated enforcement can happen and how it can happen in so many states. So just think if you want to do it, think about how you're going to address it, think about how you're going to speak to it, and make sure that you're saying it's not going to do the things that they are going to consider less favorable. And then finally, bike lanes that reduce vehicle capacity or impair vehicle movement. So that reducing vehicle capacity, my understanding of how they likely are going to interpret this is theoretical vehicle capacity. So when I was talking about level of service, I was talking about how in my community we went from 4 lanes to 2 lanes on that road, but we didn't have the vehicle volume, so the capacity was still sufficient. I think the way that they will likely interpret this is that it doesn't matter as much about the actual vehicle volume. It is that theoretical capacity. So losing those lanes in that example probably would trigger that less favorable consideration simply because you no longer have that theoretical vehicle capacity of 4 lanes. You only have a vehicle capacity of 2 lanes. So repurposing a parking lane, probably fine. New bike lanes as part of a new road, probably fine. New bike lanes that come from narrowing the lane widths, probably fine. But taking away a lane is probably going to be something that you would have to provide a very strong basis for why that is something that will not impair level of service, for why that will not impact vehicle capacity on that roadway. They don't specify exactly what they mean by impair vehicle movement. You could consider that as turning movements. You could consider that as other kind of dynamics of how vehicles interact on the road. I would bet that this is another way of saying level of service and that they want to see that new bike lanes are not going to produce delay or otherwise change vehicle volumes. And just kind of it's a backstop if you get by that theoretical capacity. So think again of how you would address why this will maintain level of service from motor vehicles if you want to add new bike lanes. Oh, and I guess that's my last slide. So I'm going to hand it over to Marisa, and I'm looking forward to your questions later.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ken. And hi, everyone. Trying to find my slides here. Okay. So amazing to have Ken's really thoughtful analysis of how to accomplish creating great places for kids and people of all ages to walk, bike, and be physically active, even when it seems like there are less favorable conditions. Okay, here we go. So I'm Marisa with Safe Routes Partnership. If we haven't met, hi, nice to meet you. Safe Routes Partnership is a national nonprofit. We lead the Safe Routes to School movement here in the US and work to make it easier and safer and more fun for kids to walk and bike to and from school and throughout their communities. And if you haven't gotten in on the fun, today's a great day to engage. Today's International Walk, Bike, and Roll to School Day. So search up what kind of safe routes activities were happening in your community today, reach out to those folks and make new friends because those are people who can help you achieve your DNPAO physical activity strategy goals. So while Ken had the amazing job of talking about how to get creative on addressing unfavorable considerations within the Safe Streets and Roads for All, I get the fun of talking about what it is that USDOT has said that they are prioritizing and what are considered favorable considerations for Safe Streets and Roads for All. And no spoilers, but there are some strategies that are favorably considered that very closely align with the work that so many of you are doing. So even though this is a tight timeline, as Ken mentioned, if you're applying for supplemental or demonstration funding, it's only a 2-page narrative. All of you are here because you've worked on a DNPAO grant, which is so much harder than applying for this. So stick with us. We're gonna pump you up and really show you exactly everything you need to know to get this funding for your community. So in the Notice of Funding Opportunity, USDOT lists out a variety of strategies that they deem favorable considerations for this year's round of Safe Streets and Roads for All. Clearly, they want to focus on safety. That is at the end of the day, they don't really care about mode shift, which is getting more people walking and biking. That, while many of us, maybe all of us, care about physical activity, that's not what this is about. This is about reducing roadway injuries and fatalities. Other things that are favorable are low cost, high impact strategies. And my background is in public health. I feel like we excel in public health at low cost, high impact strategies. So all of you here have implemented low cost, high impact strategies. You can do this. They also talk about wanting to improve safety over a wide geographic area. Reaching underserved communities, that is a favorable consideration, but noting that this administration specifically calls that out to mean rural communities. They care about beautifying infrastructure. This administration really cares about beauty and beautifying things. Luckily for us, they give us a little more insight into what that means, and while they don't give us more insight into what it means to beautify something through context-sensitive design, they do specifically call out prioritizing child-friendly elements. Another thing they talk about is truck parking, and if you have questions about that later, we could talk about it, but I'm not going to spend time on that. Evidence-based strategies are a favorable consideration. That's another thing that all of you in public health, you know the community guide. We are working to implement evidence-based strategies. You can do this. And then finally, a favorable consideration is to engage with private and public stakeholders, another thing that public health folks excel at. So while USDOT says these are favorable considerations, and what Ken shared with you all earlier, right to the test, they are telling you what they want to see. Within favorable considerations, they actually go another step further. They're giving us more of the answer key, and they're saying, if you want your application to be more competitive, here's what we want you to focus on. We want you to focus on beautifying transportation infrastructure with context appropriate design, streetscaping, for example, and or child-friendly elements. In essence, safe routes to school. We are going to talk more about that in depth in a moment. Truck parking, not going to talk about. Those of us all of us in public health, we look at that top one, we think that's not really where we are working to effectuate change. If you want to talk about truck parking, we'll do it later. And then the third thing that applications will be more competitive if they modernize public safety infrastructure, including pre-hospital blood transfusion capabilities and improve post-crash care. So this is one that is new this year. And just wanting to share this with you because maybe as public health folks, you have the relationships in this space. And this is an administration priority across modal administration. So the Federal Highway Administration, the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, we're seeing a big focus on post-crash care. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this because I think it's outside the wheelhouse of what so many of you are working on. But if you do end up applying, maybe think about how you can incorporate an element of this. And so one thing that I want to note is that when DOT here is talking about public safety infrastructure, they are not referring to hard infrastructure, concrete, bike lanes, sidewalks, roundabouts. They're talking about the soft infrastructure it takes, like the software for routing 911 calls or police enforcement of roadway injuries, fatalities, speeding. So just wanting to flag for you that this is something that there could be a nexus with. And if you are applying for an implementation grant, it is required that you have a letter of support from public safety agencies and or first responder unions. Because this is outside the scope of what so many of you are working on within your DNPAO work, this is all I'm going to say about this. But if this is like piquing an interest for you, we can talk more about it in the Q&A or in some one-on-one technical assistance. What I really want to focus on, unsurprisingly perhaps, is this favorable consideration and application will be more competitive if it includes child-friendly elements. In essence, safe routes to school. So from the 2026 NOFO, I copied and pasted, here's their exact language. Now I'm going to go through why safe routes to school is aligned with this and aligned with the favorable considerations. So safe routes to school, which is essentially any bike ped connectivity, physical infrastructure project, as well as programming to teach kids how to walk and bike to school, encourage them to do so within a 2-mile radius of a K-12 school. So 10 years ago, CDC did some research to understand how many people does that reach. And this was back when it was only K-8 schools, and that was 65% of the US population. Now this is up to K-12 schools. So I just want to tie this back also to like, if there's an unfavorable condition that you're interested in, think about how maybe you can frame it as a Safe Routes to School project. But anyway, Safe Routes to School has worked in all 50 states and the District of Columbia in rural, urban, and suburban communities. DOT says they want wide geographic reach. Safe Routes to School projects could be implemented community-wide and benefit kids, but spoiler alert, a sidewalk put in for kids near a school connecting to the library and the park can be used by people of all ages, abilities, and disabilities. Great news. It is a program that engages stakeholders across sectors. It is evidence-based to reduce roadway injuries and fatalities. And Safe Routes to School is cost-effective within 2 years, and it returns $4.40 in health and safety benefits for every dollar invested. And no need to go quickly screenshotting this to include in your narrative. At the end of this, we will send you a packet where we have all of this bulleted out that you can pull into your narrative if you want. So how can Safe Routes to School strategies help you advance your span, hop, and reach goals focused on physical activity by applying for a Safe Streets and Roads for All grant focused on Safe Routes to School? You can do engagement. You could conduct supplemental planning to talk with families, caregivers, school communities to understand what are their perceptions of safety, what are their barriers to active travel, and what do they think would make it easier or better. You can do a demonstration project to pilot engaging neighborhood residents to lead walking school buses, which are groups of kids and caregivers or older students walking to school together, picking kids up along the way. And then you can capture the both quantitative data on the number of kids participating, as well as qualitative data on perceptions of safety. And then all of that is going to help get new partners into your physical activity work and also help inform your specific community's strategies moving forward. Sorry, if you're not oriented to the safe routes to school world, it's predicated on this framework of 6 E's. So engagement is one of them. The next one is encouragement. So this is really about motivating and inspiring people to get out and walk and bike to school. We do this often through events like today's Walk, Bike, Enroll to School Day. So you could pursue a demonstration grant to place crossing guards at schools on a community-wide walk to school day, and then capture the before and after data on the number of students who walked that day and their perceptions of safety with and without crossing guards. Education is one of the 6 E's. You could use a demonstration grant to try new versions of safety campaigns, develop targeted messages, pilot adaptive education. You can deploy artistic installations to convey traffic safety messaging. You could hold pop-up safety demonstrations like traffic gardens, open streets events, bike rodeos, ciclovías. Evaluation, which public health folks are really good at, and it's one of the 6 E's. So if you're applying for a demonstration grant, all demonstration grants must be evaluated. We must understand like what changed as a result or what were perceptions as a result of this. You can also use supplemental planning grant funding to conduct bicycle pedestrian counts, roadway safety inventories, like sidewalk inventories. And then engineering, this is kind of the obvious one, but if you want to start with that comprehensive safety action plan, you can make sure that while you're looking community-wide and across travel modes, that you're doing that with an eye and a focus on safety concerns for youth mobility, and do like a special focus on strategies that will reduce crashes involving kids. Supplemental activities, you can develop a Safe Routes to School action plan. That is something that we have seen with tremendous success all years of Safe Streets and Roads for All. You can conduct roadway safety audits, analyze roadway safety crashes, focused on underserved communities, focused on youth. And then you can do all kinds of demo projects, pop-ups. I know so many of you in the Span Hop Reach communities have been doing these pop-up projects. This is an opportunity to get additional funding to supplement your precious public health dollars to pilot some of these interventions on a temporary basis. One thing to note, Ken gave the great advice to make sure that if you're applying, write it for the full 5 years. But if you're applying for a demonstration project that you're going to build something or try something, you need to show that you're going to start within 18 months. And in these follow-up materials that we'll share with you at the end of this, we have sample timelines for a variety of different demonstration grants to, again, like hopefully make this as light of a lift for you as possible to really see like, oh, what do they mean by a timeline? What could a sample timeline be? And then just put in here as well some other creative uses of Safe Streets and Roads for All funds to help advance safe routes to school. And one of the reasons I'm focusing on safe routes to school, not only because we lead the safe routes to school movement in the US, but it is an evidence-based strategy to increase physical activity. It is in the community guide. So it is very closely aligned with the goals of the work that you all are doing through your DNPAO work. So as Ken mentioned, you really got to write to the test. So we put in a couple of additional notes for you to consider. We don't need to talk through them in detail, but just really making sure that you know that you are writing this application to be reviewed by both career staff and political staff at USDOT in the Trump administration. And look at that rubric that Ken shared, and it's in the NOFO, and then we pulled out a couple of other just reminders as you are writing. So one of the focuses of Safe Streets and Roads for All is on engaging stakeholders. So please, if you were out walking for a minute, taking this as a walking meeting, I love that for you. Maybe take a moment, go to menti.com, or if you were at your computer, go on ahead and scan the QR code. or you can go to menti.com and use the code 76357720. I'm going to put this in the chat too. Code. I know we've been talking at you for a while, so I want to take a moment, if I can figure out how to do this, to do a little engagement activity. Yes, okay. So we've got one more section of our presentation before we get to all of your questions and answers. And so I really want to know from you, based on your perceptions coming into this meeting and what Ken and I have been sharing, where are you at when I say this? Winning Safe Streets and Roads for All funds as a SPAN, HOP, or REACH recipient feels achievable. Yes, maybe, no way. So please take a moment. We're going to give folks, I know I didn't give you a heads up that there was going to be a Menti. Maybe you walked away for a moment, or maybe you've never used this tool. It is a very cool tool. Highly encourage you to try it sometime. I'm going to give one more minute, but I'm really heartened to see that people feel like this is achievable. That is great. Love that. Anybody else want to chime in here? Does it feel, you can also respond in the chat if you would like, but use the tool if you can. Does it feel achievable? Yes, maybe no way. Okay, maybe we've gotten everybody who's going to share, so we'll come back to our presentation. And this is where I want to take a moment to really ground everything that we've been sharing, which has been really focused on the work that Ken and I do, that's like really in the transportation space, and bring it back to public health here for a minute. So while some of this might seem daunting, you've got less than 3 weeks to apply, this is not the federal agency you're used to applying for, we want to share with you that this is so achievable and doable. And you don't have to just take that from us. We want to show you the success that your colleagues, your peers in this cohort of SPAN, HOP, and REACH recipients have had accessing these Safe Streets and Roads for All funds. So I am so happy that our colleagues at the Centers for Disease Control were able to pull this information together, and I'm able to share it with you today. So this slide shows that in the last 4 years, DNPAO recipients leveraged over $227 million from Safe Streets and Roads for All to support community design for physical activity projects. The first 3 years of SS4A was over $212 million. And just last year in 2025, it was over $15 million that your colleagues, some of the people on this call, some of the people who we got to meet at the National Partner Training in Atlanta, and on these kinds of workshops over the last 4 years. So this is so doable. And while prior years we shared examples from Pima County, who I know is on this call, and others, we can share today that these are the 2025 DNPAO recipients who collectively were awarded over $15 million for projects in their communities. So we broke this out into rural awardees: West Virginia University, developing an action plan; Montana State University, action plan, supplemental, and demonstration projects; University of Missouri, Georgia State University; and then urban awardees doing everything from action planning, supplemental planning, and demonstration projects in Hawaii, Ohio, and Tennessee. So you don't just have to take it from me and Ken cheering you on that you can do this. You can see the tremendous success that your colleagues have had and know that you can do it too. So to dig in a little bit further, just to 2 of these DNPAO colleagues, so Montana State University last year was awarded $625,000 to develop a safety action plan and conduct supplemental planning that includes safe routes to school components. And actually, one other thing that I neglected to mention, so I hope I was compelling enough about child-friendly elements and safe routes to school and that being a public health strategy, but we also have inside intel that USDOT is specifically funding Safe Routes to School projects with SS4A. And we've seen that the first 4 years, and then we've heard that from them this year, and it's in your application will be more competitive if, so don't just take it from me, but hopefully this all gives you a little wind in your sails that you can write a 2-page narrative with the proper partners and get funded. And then Youngstown State University, almost $300,000. Shout out to Dr. G. I know this is something that Ken's team at the Bike League and my team have been talking with Dr. G about since that national partner meeting in Atlanta. So really thrilled to see them get this funding to test pedestrian prioritized temporary street closures on and around campus. So way to go. Hopefully any of you who were in that no way or maybe are now skewed a little more towards like, yes, DMPAO recipients can get this money. Okay, so as promised, there's so much help available for you. So as Ken mentioned, both the Bike League and Safe Routes Partnership are able to provide technical assistance targeted for your community, your specific questions. All you have to do is submit a request through AMP asking for technical assistance on Safe Streets and Roads for All, and that will be routed to one of our teams. Both of our teams have had amazing success supporting communities, or have helped communities be successful applying for Safe Streets and Roads for All. In addition to that technical assistance, our team at Safe Routes Partnership has pulled together these application worksheets that walk you through step by step everything you need to do to submit this application. So as Ken mentioned, there are certain data points that you need to collect. We have a QR code that you scan. It'll take you to the calculator for how to calculate your fatality rate, how to calculate where you're if you're in an area of persistent poverty. We have these for the planning and demonstration grants. We have them for the implementation grants. We will drop a link in the chat. These are a tool for you to use. Please use them. Other resources, of course, USDOT's website on Safe Streets and Roads for All. As Ken mentioned, they give these scoring rubrics in the NOFO. Look at them. They're telling you how to respond. Our friends at the local infrastructure hub, they have Safe Streets and Roads for All boot camp modules, but maybe more helpfully, they post on there PDFs of winning applications from other communities. So go on and look at those. And then we at the partnership have more examples of Safe Routes to School specific ideas for Safe Streets and Roads for All. And then additionally, we have, as I mentioned, we have a toolkit that has these talking points that shows how Safe Routes to School is evidence-based to reduce injuries, fatalities, is cost-effective, reaches wide geographies, as well as everything, including like those sample timelines for demonstration grants. So we will make sure that you get all of these. But again, really want to make a plug for the individualized help that's available through Ken at the Bike League and my team at the partnership, request TA through AMP. And shameless plug, Safe Routes to School National Conference happening in Minneapolis this October. Early bird registration is open. Hope to see you all there. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and we have lots of time. We have 40 minutes. I don't even know that we will need all of that, but we have 40 minutes available to answer any questions that you all have. So this is structured as a meeting rather than a webinar so that you can just come off mute if you would like. I'm going to sort of scroll back through the chat. Oh, props. Ken, looks like you were answering as we go, which is great. But if people have questions, please just come on mute. You can ask general questions or specific questions, and we will do our best to answer them or follow up.
Hi, this is
Leslie, are you coming off mute? We see you.
Hi, this is Mary Beth from Clemson
Hey.
University. Hi. I had a question about the match. So we've been working, this is the second round. The first round we were able to get one grant for a town. It was 300,000 and they made the match from the town. And when I work in rural areas, nobody has match funding. And I know it can be in kind, but it's just hard for me to wrap my mind around, like, how can you really make up all that, match requirement through in-kind donation? So what are y'all's thoughts on creative ways to make the match And then I do have another follow-up question about the university sponsoring. We thought about that as well, but our indirects are so high, it just was going to suck up the entire, it seemed like the whole funding. So just some thoughts on that.
Sure. I'm happy to start on the match. And then Ken, if you have thoughts. So a great thing, as you noted, you can use in kind. And so things that we would encourage you to sort of back of the envelope, see what you can get to is, are there staff, are there salaries that are not paid for by the federal government that are in service of what you would be looking for? So I'm sorry. I promise I care about things more than safe routes to school. That's just what's on my brain right now because it's good for safe streets for all. But for example, crossing guard salaries, if you have a safe routes to school coordinator, all of those, and they're not paid by the federal government, all of those salaries could go as match. You can quantify volunteer hours. And I think we had this in last year's presentation, so I can find, or you can just use your favorite internet browser search engine, and there's a specific rate for quantifying that the value of volunteer dollars. You could host meetings somewhere that is donating the time, and you can quantify the value of that time or of that rental. How much would you pay to rent the rec center that is you're getting to use for free? It is something that you would have to manage closely. But if you truly don't have dollars available, like it's a good way to go. Ken, do you have other thoughts on match?
The other thing I've seen for rural areas in particular is if you have a lot of rural areas that can't manage match kind of individually, perhaps there's a rural serving funder in the state or a rural serving state entity that would be able to provide that match to several rural areas at one time where they might not be able to do the individual basis to those rural areas. So kind of bundling together those rural low capacity needs and finding a funder or a state agency sponsor or some entity that does not receive federal funding so that you aren't trying to match federal funding with federal funding, which is only allowed in very rare circumstances for this program, could be an opportunity. And I think that's been done in a number of states where it's kind of been bundled together to a larger statewide entity that has then provided that match or helped them find that match in a way that just wasn't meeting the capacity of those rural areas without bundling them together. So that might be a thing to try. And if you're interested in that, I think we could probably dig into that more and walk through how other states have accomplished that.
And Ken, did you drop something in the chat about match for tribal and American Indian Alaska Native tribes? I know there's like a
Yeah,
provision
so
for
there
that. That's
there
helpful.
is language for federally recognized tribes. They can use federal funds through the Tribal Transportation Program and the Tribal Transportation Program Safety Funds. So that's a rare case where federal funds can provide that match. And then just in case anyone on this call or listening to this call in the future is from the U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, American Samoa, or the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands, those communities, if their required local match is less than $200,000, can get their project funded 100% by the federal government. So that's a really great opportunity for those communities and only those communities. But just in case anyone hears that, it'd be great for them to apply. And it is one of those things that the administration is looking for. Places that have not applied for these funds in the past, they want to give those funds to new applicants. To my knowledge, none of those places that are eligible for 100% federal funding have gotten a previous award. So this would be the hopefully not the last time for them to access it, but an ideal time for them to access it.
And then Mary Beth, there was a second part of your question about your university indirect. Ken, I don't know if you have a more specific answer, but without knowing the specifics of your university, I would just point back to we just shared 7 DNPAO universities that navigated this. When we look at the last several years, the land grant universities have been successful at this. So happy to follow up with a more specific budgetary question, or maybe just knowing that other places have figured it out. Sometimes they can give that wind in your sails of like, okay, it's doable.
Thank you. Yes, I will follow up with those universities.
Right. I see a question in the chat from Celeste. Does anyone know of projects that weren't funded, reapplied a different year, and then were funded? I'm assuming this would be less likely since this is the last round of funding. Do you want to take a pass at that, Ken?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with a specific community where they had that kind of set of applications. But I think many communities are trying just every year. We had a webinar with the city of Riverside, California, which has received 2 implementation grants, and they're applying for an implementation grant every single year of the program to give themselves those opportunities. And I forget the exact language, but I know in this notice of funding opportunity, they noted while this is the last year funded under this bill, for, I believe it's the implementation grants that are highly rated. If they aren't able to be funded, those will be kind of carried forward for priority in a future iteration of this program. So I think it's, very worthwhile to make the attempt. And I think the popularity of this program and the fact that it's reached so many communities in every single state make it the type of program that it's very likely that Congress will find the funding for in the future. So it's worth applying, and I would recommend it.
We have more time, but I do want to just note, in case anybody has to jump at the top of the hour, reminder that you can submit technical assistance requests specific to your community, work through questions you have by submitting a request through AMP. And we will make sure that you all get all the follow-up materials that we talked about. But yeah, other questions, feel free to come off mute or drop things in the chat. Anyone on the call thinking they're either planning to apply or thinking about applying and want to talk through a project idea, get any feedback, have budget questions, coordination questions?
Hi,
Hey,
Marissa.
Aaron,
How are
how's
you?
it going?
It's going well. I do have a question. I did just email the West Virginia HOP folks. So I'm at NC State and HOP, and I was just curious about the action plans that West Virginia applied for and was able to receive. Like any information that might help us, because I think what we're finding is our county agents are all pretty tapped out in what they're doing right now, as a lot of our partners are. And so if we're able to apply at the university, we have a little more capacity, especially with a 20-day time turnaround.
Yeah, I can pull it up. I can pull up the very short summary. My recollection is that they're doing a roadway safety assessment of like a 3.5 mile corridor. I didn't put it in here because it didn't feel very physical activity-y,
Yeah.
but let me just drop in here.
Well, even the Youngtown State example, was that just on their academic campus or yeah? So it has to be close to the actual campus?
No, it doesn't. So, oh wait, what's happening? It doesn't. So Youngstown State is related to their campus. And my recollection from conversations with Dr. G is like it's a big commuter school. And so there's a lot of like parking and then walking. And so they were really interested in on-campus interventions. I cannot copy and paste this Excel spreadsheet from WVU, but it says this will be used by WVU Morgantown to develop a Vision Zero safety action plan for a 3.5-mile segment of West Virginia Route 705 using an AI-assisted simulation model. Tasks include 3D mapping, real-time risk modeling, cost-benefit analysis, public-facing dashboards, and a prioritized list of countermeasures. Deliverables are the simulation model, safety reports, and the action plan to guide future safety projects. And that's like a $1.25 million project.
Right. That's
Sorry,
helpful.
I can't copy.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's helpful. And I've emailed their HOP team. Okay. I know how to find you and Ken.
And if it's, I can also drop in the chat. Like, yeah, you reach out to us. We're happy to look at this for you, but you can also access the spreadsheets with these summaries and just like search by university and see what folks are doing. Can try and drop a link in the chat.
And I'll just add, Youngstown State did receive 2 grants, and their second one specifically talks about the surrounding roadways that connect the campus to community. So it does involve that coordination with the community and goes outside of the campus area. So that's not a restriction in terms of what universities can be funded for. And I know while it has not yet been successful, I worked with the University of Missouri in Kansas City on a grant last year that would have been on a public road or a couple public roads around their hospital campus, but were public roads adjacent to the university. So it's not a restriction. The university applicants just deal with university roads. Are there other folks with?
Oh, go ahead,
Victoria?
Ken.
I was just going to ask if there were other folks with specific questions about applications they might be working on, or things that they've noticed in this notice of funding opportunity, or perhaps previous webinars by USDOT. I do know one of those points of emphasis that has definitely stuck out to me is that demonstration projects must be temporary. They must be removed at some point within the period of performance within that 5 years. That's something that wasn't stressed as much in previous years, and it may change the types of infrastructure that you want to pilot and demonstrate. I think one of the USDOT presenters on a webinar last month really cautioned people against doing demonstrations that involved concrete or cement that might be difficult to remove. So I just want to note there are many modular solutions to do things like curbs and roundabouts, and kind of the separation of bike lanes or curb extensions. So that technology has been advancing over the last couple of years. And I know several places where there's also been an effort to kind of purchase a kind of kit of parts that can be moved around the community, or if you're in a regional area, to different communities. So you're kind of building in that impermanence and making it a feature rather than a bug. So that's just one of those things that's really stuck out to me in kind of the areas of emphasis under this administration is those pilot and demonstration projects need to be impermanent and need to be removed. Mary Beth, I see your hand.
Can you give us some clarity on what beautification means? I wasn't sure. Could it be sculpture or does it have to be functional, like a planter used as a bollard or covered park bench? Well, that's permanent, I guess. You'd hate to put something like that and take it away.
Just for everybody's awareness, Marisa is having some computer problems, and we'll be right back on this Zoom in a second. But as she sort of had mentioned earlier, there's not like a lot of guidance on what beautification really means to the DOT, but they did note, child-friendly elements, and I think Marisa should have a couple of other things that she would note, but what we have seen is that the administration has had some like notes on whether they consider like bike lanes beautiful, and there has been like some commentary there, and so like sort of extrapolating from that, um and here's what he says, so she'll be able to talk a little bit more about beautification.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I was just being awkward. I could see my screen, I had no ability to unmute myself or type anything. I think the question was about beautification. I believe there's an old adage that says that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So I don't know that there's a lot of definition here. We've heard, I mean, certainly from what the president cares a lot about are things being beautiful. We've heard that part of his opposition to bike lanes generally is that he finds them ugly, unaesthetically pleasing. I think there's some intentional ambiguity in what this means. I'm sorry I don't have better guidance for you here, but I would encourage you to, I don't know, Ken, you were just coming off mute. Do you have better guidance here?
I don't have much better guidance, but kind of the two areas where I might look for beautification guidance would be, well, maybe it's more than two. The Transportation Alternatives Program has had beautification as one of its eligible activities for a number of years. So that might be an area to look to see where previous awarded grants have been awarded for beautification and what beautification meant in those activities. It could also be a prompt to work with or talk about your work with a landscape architect or somebody else who is associated with beautification more generally. Architects, landscape designers are kind of called out in some of the administration's published materials about beautifying transportation infrastructure. So looking to those materials, executive orders about beautification, and what they say and mirroring that language, or at least showing deference to the types of things that they say that they care about in those materials, like working with an architect or a landscape designer or artists, could be a good way to speak to beautification.
So could you generate a plan, a beautification plan using a variety, maybe an artist and an architect? That kind of, could that be part of it? And that's not permanent. I mean, it is permanent, but it's not structure. It's there. I just wondered if that would be an activity that you could include and then get community to, chip away at it as money was available to install whatever. I mean, I can get my mind around paint because that's sort of non-permanent just by virtue of the paint. But some of these other beautification things, like a tree, a shade tree or something like that, that's definitely not something I'm going to chop down in 5 years or what. I'm just really shocked at that. I'm with you. I've been trained with Mark Fenton, and he talks about how some structures get put in and they're still there 10 years later. And so I'm a little Just disappointed that that language is heavier this time about removal for some things like that.
Yeah, so certainly a plan. You could get a beautification plan funded as part of a planning and demonstration grant or a supplemental planning and demonstration grant that either is by itself or bundled with an implementation grant. You would still need to make sure that you're making the case that it's related to traffic safety and reducing traffic deaths and serious injuries. So it would have to be, how the beautification is going to relate to the infrastructure changes contemplated by the plan to make them beautiful. It also makes me think of, I know a project is AARP funded in my community, where we bought these big plastic planters off Amazon, and we used those to divert traffic on a bikeway in one of the neighborhoods. And just recently I rode by, and now the city has put plants in them. So those plants are in planters, and they are impermanent, and they can be moved somewhere else if we had to under the grant program. Since that was an ARP grant, they aren't checking up on what's happening with those planters. But if you planted plants in big planters as part of a demonstration project, and then you moved them somewhere else, I think that would probably satisfy the impermanence and the removal requirement of this grant program. So maybe thinking about how to be creative and creating something that could be quasi-permanent, but not necessarily permanent there, in one place within the program, the performance period.
One thing I would just add to this, and just really focusing back on what Ken said, is make sure it's tied to safety. That's what this money is for at the end of the day. Also flagging that under the prior administration that oversaw this grant, it was allowable that if your demonstration project was having a positive safety outcome, you could leave it. So we also advised a 5-year, like write your demo grant for 5 years. Under the Constitution, this presidential administration will not be in place in 5 more years. And so if the program continues, potentially the subsequent administration could view things differently. But ultimately, I think Ken gave really good advice on beautification. But it's ambiguous. Sometimes the administration and Congress writes things kind of ambiguously to then be able to interpret decisions according to how the outcome that they want under the auspices of vague language. And I'm really sorry, everyone, my screen keeps freezing. So
That
I'm
was
here.
super
not
helpful.
you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I can't see the chat or anything. So Victoria or Ken, if you can, or hands up or anything, but
No new things in the chat.
okay, cool.
But and as I say that, a new thing in the chat. Sabrina, what about bollards and signage? Could those items be considered temporary and part of a demonstration project? Yes. Again, if they are part of a temporary demonstration project, under the current notice of funding opportunity and the grant agreement that is anticipated to be signed, you will likely have to move them within the 5-year performance period, unless that changes. So again, it might be the type of thing where you want to make sure that those signs are mounted in a way that makes them easier to remove or makes them easier to reposition. There are a wide array of bollards, and how you can affix bollards or curb stops or other traffic calming devices into the roadway pavement. You could be strategic, thinking about what your repaving schedule is in your community, and if there will be a change in that roadway through repaving in the future during that 5-year performance period anyways, so that you're kind of looking ahead and building in that temporary and impermanent nature to the infrastructure. So bollards and signage, definitely good things, definitely great parts of a demonstration project. But I would recommend thinking about how you want to deal with their impermanence so that you are leveraging them as best as you can.
Anyone else? Questions? We really appreciate all of you being here, the work that you're doing through your DNPAO work, and we are really hopeful that you are seeing this as a way to supplement the funding that you have through CDC to implement or further your community design for physical activity strategies. And we are here to help you be successful. So hopefully today got you thinking about it, got it on your timelines that we've got less than 3 weeks, and you've seen that your peers can do it, and there's help available to you in the form of toolkits and real people who, obviously, by our enthusiasm, you can tell how much we love this program. We want to help you get this money. So please submit a TA request through AMP, and Ken's team and my team will be more than happy to work on this with you. If there aren't any other questions, maybe we roll out. I can't see if there are more questions.
There are not more questions at this point, so it's like a going once, going twice. But yeah, I would echo what Marisa said. This is a very exciting program. It's done a lot of great work. I know it's going to do a lot of great work in the future. Hopefully, this is not the last year. And it's really important to go after the funding that's available, and that's going to help make the case to Congress and the administration that there is this overwhelming support for safer streets, and that this program is one of those ways that people see as a great difference maker for traffic safety. And yeah, we're happy to assist and really thank all of you for attending today.
Thanks so much, everyone. We'll follow up with the recording of the presentations and the materials that we referenced. And thanks, CDC, for hosting. Take care, everyone.